right. I think I got it. Okay. All right, so this is Zach Hoddle with the Shenandoah County Library Archives. I'm here interviewing Gwen Nickens about integration in Shenandoah County. And I'll let her go ahead and just give her name and her address, if you would.
Absolutely. My name is Gwendolyn. Everybody just called me Gwen. Tolliver was my maiden name, and that was the name that, of course, I was in school with integration with, and now I am married to Nickens. So I'm Gwendolyn Tolliver Nickens, and I live at Winchester, Virginia. My husband and I have been there now for about 34, 35 years.
Okay.
Woodstock was my home. That's where I was born and raised. My parents were Theodore, better known as Jim Tolliver, and my mother was Mary Jane, better known as Janie Tolliver. I went to school there, and I was the first one to integrate schools and attend Central High School. And that was several years ago. In fact, it was 1962, and I graduated in 1966. So that's kind of a brief history on my background.
So I guess maybe we could just start off, if you can tell us a little in your own words about when you how did it come to be that you were the first person to integrate Central High School, and kind of how that all began, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, my elementary background involves a one-room school with one teacher who taught 7 grades. Mm-hmm. And she was the backbone of what I am, for the simple fact her name was Genevieve R. McLean. She was a West Virginia native. That was where she lived. She lived in Woodstock here in a private home of one of the local people, and she was our teacher. She was quite a unique, special lady, very professional. She handled 7 grades in one room, and people, when they think about that now, it's just unbelievable. The rapport, the discipline, and the control that she had was just unbelievable. We sat in rows, of course. It wasn't a very large attendance, even though it involved Woodstock, Mount Jackson, and part of New Market. So the children from Mount Jackson and New Market were bused down the road, and those of us lived here had, of course, the opportunity to be right here, but we all went to school there. We were in rows where the younger children, the first graders, were in the front, and as you progressed in your schooling year, you went further to the back of the school. It was heated with a wood-burning pot-bellied stove. It had, of course, our desks. It had one very long table in the very back where we would meet for our classes. Around the back of the school was our library. It wasn't very large, but there were books there that we could check out or that we could read. But again, this lady had such a control over us, and the classes also progressed in that order. The first ones, the little ones, were first to go to their classes, and then the older ones proceeded. We had not only reading, writing, and arithmetic, but she also covered geography and science.
Okay.
We were, like I said, allowed to use the library for our history. We had history. And, of course, she would have us come up and did a lot of individualizing with us, different days for different age groups. And when our class time came, we met at this long table that was in the back of the school, and we sit down and went through our lessons. When we had tests, we would do it from our desk. It just, when I think back on it, but then it just seemed so routine and normal. And you learn from the moment you went to her what she expected of you, what was expected of you. And not only did she teach us the basics in our studies, she also interjected socialization, being able to get up and do recitations, sing music. In the morning we would have the Pledge of Allegiance. We would have some type of Bible verse or something from the Bible, and we would be able to relate from our day before. All of this was done, like I said, so uniquely, but it was handled, and by the end of the day, everything that was planned to be done was done. Then kind of as a little extra thing on the side for extra time, since she lived here and didn't have to travel, she would have us stay if you were interested in learning the basis of cooking.
Mm-hmm.
She was involved. I was a Girl Scout with a local group here in Woodstock. She got involved with that, with us girls. She stressed to the young men about being a man and all of the things that go along with that, how to respect ladies. I mean, this woman was just unbelievable. And it's due to her and the support of my parents and other people of the community, along with the pastor, the local black pastor in our community, who allowed us to use the church when we did special events. We had spelling bees. We learned how to make spaghetti, basic food dishes. We learned how to make homemade ice cream. And we even had an old crank ice cream freezer. And she acquainted us with that. So this lady, like I said, gave and laid the groundworks for who I am today, along with the assistance of all the other people in the community. And we got along well. If there were any disputes, she handled them. And she knew she had the full support of most of the parents, and definitely mine, for whatever she said, you try to do. In fact, my father quoted to my brother, who was older than I, "If Mrs. McLean tells you to go out and climb that big tree, then you go and try. Give it your best effort." And it wasn't any question. So, but after I finished that, there were only 3 of us in my graduating class. That's how small most of the classes were. All girls. And when we finished school, it was like right away what the normal process, because my brother, who graduated several years before I did, was you were bused from Woodstock to Winchester, where the first or the closest black high school was. And that was Douglas High School in Winchester, Virginia. My brother went there. In fact, when he got old enough, a lot of people, again, it's like, you're kidding, and he got his driver's license, he drove the school bus that transported the black children from Woodstock. Then he would stop in Strasburg and get those. Then he would stop in Stevens City and get those, and took them on into Winchester, and that's where he went to high school. Well, when it came time for me to go to high school, my mother had a relative who lived in Washington, D.C., who had had several major operations, back operations, and she just needed someone to be in her apartment with her to kind of assist her. And she had different nurses and other people that had, but she got to the point where she felt all she really needed was just an extra set of hands. So she approached my mom and said, "Now, Gwen's finishing elementary school. Would you think she would come down and stay with me for a year or so and just be?" And Mom said, "Well, I will ask her." So they approached me, and I agreed to do that. And it was like, okay, well, where will she go to school? Well, of course, I graduated from the 7th grade, so that meant I'd be going into the 8th. So her looking into the situation and where she lived in Washington, the nearest junior high in the city that I would go to was Francis Junior High in Georgetown. She was right on the edge of D.C. and to Georgetown. So that was where I would go. So we went and got it set up. And when I moved in with her that summer, when I started school, I went to Francis Junior High in Georgetown. I went there for the full year that I lived with her. It was quite an experience for me to come from a little country one-room school and go into a junior high city school. It was overwhelming, but I adjusted. I made friends. And, of course, there were those there that made fun of me because of not only the way I talked, the way I walked, the way I dressed. And I kind of stood out, but after a while they accepted me. and everything worked out. So I went to Francis Junior High for my 8th grade year. Near the middle of that year, my mother started really missing me. And they would come down and visit, and of course, vacation days at school, I was able to come home and all. So she sat me down and she said, I really miss you. I think you should come home. And I said, well, I've enjoyed being in Washington, but I'd like to come home. So she said, well, I've got a plan, and I want to ask you how you feel about it. Now, my mother was the one that was kind of leading this. My father was kind of in the background. He didn't say a whole lot, but at least he gave his support.
Right.
And she said, rather than go to Douglas, I'd like to see you stay right here in Woodstock and go to Central. We have a perfectly good high school right here. There's no reason for that. But there's only one thing. No one else goes there. You would be the first one. Do you have a problem or an issue with that? I said, no, none. Are you sure? I'm positive. If it means that I can get to come home. So she very bravely and boldly went and talked to the school superintendent and informed him first that she and my father would be enrolling me to start Central the next school year. Well, it kind of took him back, and he said, you're going to do what? And she said, yes. Jim and I, my father, have lived in this community for years. In fact, my father was born here in Woodstock. He worked for several of the well-known families as a young man and ended up being an auto mechanic and worked for the local Chevrolet dealers.
Okay.
So she said, and I've been married to him now, and we've raised our children. I've worked for a lot of people in the community in their homes. They all know Jim and I. And this is our daughter, the last one, and we want her to be at home and go to school. So he said, well, do what you think is best, but, you know, this is kind of going to be difficult. She said, Gwen's ready, and we're going to take it for what it's worth. So she enrolled me that summer, and when the time came for me to start school, of course, there were some people who were very skeptical, even in my own race. I told my parents they were making a mistake. They didn't feel that it was the time. And again, they all approached me, how do you feel about it? Are you scared? And I said, no. No, I've got enough in me to know that I'm going to go and make the best of it, and it's going to work out. So when the day came for me to start, my mother was a nervous wreck. And, of course, all the mother fears. Have I made a mistake? And, of course, we had a few calls, telephone calls. Don't send that you-know-what out here. If you do, it's going to be a problem. We're going to hurt her. And, of course, my mother got more and more nervous. And finally, the day I was to go, they were going to send a bus to pick me up. And then they decided, no, we're not going to take a chance. We're going to send a private car and let the car take her. So I was all ready. And my mom said at the last minute, I don't think you should go. And my father, who was at work at the garage, he had come home and he looked at her. He said, no, we've come this far. Gwen wants to do it. It's going to be all right. So she reluctantly let me get in that car. And when we drove up at Central to go in, of course the newspaper was there, the local media, and a lot of parents of some of the children were there. And they were all around, and the staff, most of them came out, the principal, and escorted me in. And they took me into school, and they introduced me to all the necessary people. They gave me my schedule. They assigned one of the local students who would be in my class to be kind of my guide and be with me that day, like my buddy.
Okay.
And I learned my way around the school, and I knew what classes I had to attend. They put me in with, when I say the children who were like the doctors, the lawyers, the department store owners, they put me in with those children rather than with the children that were from the country. And what they had done was they had talked with these students. And they all said, oh yeah, my dad knows her dad. They come out to our house, or her mom comes in our store, or they knew my family.
Right.
And they were, oh yeah, we're glad to have Gwen. We're excited about it. So they put me in with them.
Okay.
And so there wasn't any issue there at all. Different people asked me what happened in school, and it was like no one approached me to do anything to me.
Right.
But there were a lot of little comments made when I would go down the hallway or from the stairwell, or once in a while, some of them in the cafeteria or something like that. But these children that I were in with, it was always one or two of them with me.
Okay.
And they would, especially the boys, they would say, you touch her, you're going to answer me. She deserves to be here as well as you and I.
Right.
Let her alone. And within a couple weeks' time, it was like everyday practice.
Right.
There were a few looks, but that went on for a while. But never any incident, no confirmation, nothing like that. And within time, it was like I was just one of the group.
Right.
So that year went very, very well. And I got involved in sports and other activities. I've always liked to sing, so I got in the glee singing group and all. And all of those things were only pluses. And I guess you could say, in a matter of fact, I proved myself that I could do what they do. I was willing to learn. And most of my teachers were very supportive. In fact, all of them. And complimentary, and how proud they were to have me. And when we got to the part in government, or in my senior year, but the early years of history, where we talked about slavery, they would kind of, how's she going to take it? But hey, that's all part of history. I was proud of the fact of, I'm different from you, but we're all in this together. And my teacher said, that is just so great. And there are some things that maybe you can tell us that's not in this book.
Right.
Like what we're doing here today. And I was blessed to have good grandparents. My mom's parents lived in Mount Jackson. My grandfather was a farmer. And I had that experience of knowing what that was like. And my grandmother would sit down and tell us things. So I had that knowledge. My father's parents lived here in Woodstock, and there were things that they told me that they experienced in life. So I did have some things that I could share with them from my history and my background. And it just went real smooth.
That's good.
So by the next year, after the other black people in the community saw how smooth it was going, it kind of encouraged them, and more started coming.
All right.
More started coming, and then finally they did away with the need to even go to Winchester.
Right.
And it was just protocol.
Right.
So it kind of fell right into place. And it's been all right ever since, as far as I know.
Now, I'm curious a little bit about, you said your mother was the real driving force behind you. Was that, you think, a personal decision on her part, or what do you think drove her to?
I think it was more that mother thing. She wanted me home.
Okay.
And having experienced the commute and having to deal with my brother, who went to Douglas. I mean, she had nothing against Douglas, and my mother was the kind of mother, like more should be, who checked in with the school periodically. She wasn't a stay-at-home, hands-off.
Right.
She was very much involved the whole time my brother was there. And the best way for her to get there, she made her plans. She would ride the bus there. And, of course, when my brother drove, she got to see how well he did that and how proud she was that he was able to handle that, as well as be in school. But she had a personal interest on his progress. My brother was very athletic, and he loved football. And she supported him at that, but she also wanted those academic things to come in play. And the best way to find out, she would go to classes with him and then talk with the teachers.
Right.
So when my time came, I think it was the actual having me home
Right.
where she had a more hands-on, more being able to be there. Because when I went to Central, she came there
Okay.
periodically. And a good parent does that.
Right.
I mean, she didn't do it to interfere or to make my brother or I embarrassed, even though she did embarrass my brother. You can imagine
Right.
a young man who is a junior or a senior in high school, and there his mama is sitting up in there. But they understood, and the teachers really liked that because they knew that that parental guidance and support was there. And she wanted to know. And if he wasn't doing, and the same thing with me, then you don't play football for a year.
Right.
Because the academic part of it, by them both my parents not completing schooling. My father didn't go very far at all. He dropped out like most young boys do. But my father had a given intellect that a lot of people, he read a lot.
Right.
He put himself through a male communication course.
Okay.
But he loved that kind of stuff. He was always good with his hands, being a mechanic. And he read a lot. He had very high abilities that he never, unfortunately, got to use or put to practice. But it was there. My mother went, I think she told me, to 9th grade.
Okay.
And she had to come home. She, too, was in the city living with relatives because she lived up Mount Jackson, back up in the country. But her mother got ill.
Okay.
And she was one of the ones that was able to come home and take care of Mom. So she had to drop out of school.
Right.
So her education kind of went to a limit, and they both wanted, my brother and I, to have more.
Right. So you think it's more of a practical
Pat, you have a call
Yes.
line 1.
reason for
Pat,
you to go to
line
school
1,
than it
please.
was for
Practical.
some.
Absolutely. Practical, as well as knowing I was going to get what I needed.
Right.
Douglas was perfectly all right, but it was different. It was a setting, because I used to go out. It was quite interesting for me to go to my brother's
Brisbane South,
house.
pharmacy call line 2. Brisbane South,
And there was a
pharmacy
lot
call line
given,
2,
but there was a
please.
lot that was missed.
Right.
And my brother got the basics, but there wasn't anything really for him to excel in.
Okay.
The teachers were all qualified, but my mother knew there was more. And it had been done. It was the normal practice for everybody to go there. And she wanted to break that mold and provide for me. She looked and saw in me, thanks to Mrs. McLean again and other people, her and other people in my community, that it was there that I could do more.
Right.
And the possibility of even college. So it was more practical, supportive, want me home
Right.
type thing.
And you definitely think Central gave you more than you would have gotten out of
Absolutely.
going to Douglas.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, I guess backing up a little bit, I had a couple questions. First, you said you were in Girl Scouts. And I hadn't thought about this before until you said that. Were the Girl Scout troops segregated?
Yes, by the time I got there.
Okay.
The leader of the Girl Scouts when I was in it was the wife of the administrator of the hospital.
Okay.
She was the one that had the time. She picked it up. She had been one for years when he moved here to take that job. And she encouraged young girls,
Okay.
which most of those people that are involved in those Scout organizations. And she even reached out to my school and the
Okay.
community. She made personal visits and extended the invitation for us little girls to get involved. And it was due to her that over half my school of the girls joined.
Okay.
So it was another, from someone caring, coming from an area where it was not as common to have segregation, where there
Right.
was more integration. And she knew the capability was there, and she extended the invitation. And I just loved it. I mean, I fell right into
Right.
it. And the handwork, the volunteer work, being able to earn the badges and to do all of that. And she was very supportive of that. So But yeah, she reached out. It wasn't
Okay.
that we had to hunt her out. She actually came out to us
Okay.
through the school superintendent and my teacher.
Mm-hmm.
She approached her and talked to her one-on-one first. Ms. McLean, I'd like to come to your school if you'd allow me and talk to your girls about the Girl Scouts. And of course, my teacher was very, yes indeed,
Right.
let's give these young ladies everything we possibly can. So that's kind of how that all
Okay. Now, do you think there were other people in the white community like her that were supportive
Oh,
of
yeah.
integration?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, most of the people that were doctors, lawyers, store owners, organization leaders, ministers, most of them knew my father
Okay.
and knew where he came from, knew what he was,
Right.
and was very supportive when it was like, finally, when, it came out.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this. I mean, this should have been done a long time ago, Jim. I mean, you've got 3 children,
Right.
and 2 of them, well, unfortunately, my brother, but my sister died way before she was able to really. She died at 11 years old. She had been sick most of her life. So it was my brother, my sister Shirley, and I was the baby. So my brother and I were the 2 when she passed. I was only 5 years old when my sister died. So they encouraged my father and mother,
Okay.
and they were really glad when this happened. It was, very supportive. Yes, do this. That's
Right.
where they belong. You're part of this community. You've lived here all of your life. So I can't say that I know of anyone that didn't. They never told me
Okay.
any of the ones that didn't, because most of the people that knew my father
All right.
and got to know my mother after years of being in the area were very supportive.
So you think that personal connection had a
Oh,
part to play?
yes. Oh, yes. I mean, how can you support someone when you really don't know them?
Right.
I mean, that gives the foundation of being able to say, I know what this person can do. I know what this person is. I've lived with them. I've seen their work. I've worked with them. And yes, I really do. And there was a lot. Because like I said, there wasn't any problem at all.
Okay.
A few, but they were soon put down or told, hey,
Right.
leave it alone. And then after a while, it was like I said, just like every day.
And you think definitely the economic standing of people affected the way they viewed integration?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you're exposed, if you're told that it's all part of life, and people, even in my own race, like I said, some of our own community wasn't real happy or receptive, or, what are you doing? You're going to mess up things. You're going to cause problems. But that comes from not truly understanding or being given the fact that, hey, you deserve it too. If you come up in a status where I need to stay where I am, I can't cross that line, then that's the way you're going to be, in my opinion. And if you're a better, I won't use the word class, but if you come up with a different understanding,
Right.
and in those homes, they were told we're all equal.
Right.
Jim and Janie's kids are just like you kids. They deserve it just as well as you do. Let them prove themselves. You don't judge someone simply because of the color, like it's being said
Right.
now, of their skin. That don't make them any different. They're just like us. You cut them, they bleed just like we do. And it was the people that were the better. And most of them, like I said, it was what they were given from their experiences in life. They had traveled, or they had even had the experience of going to schools where there was integration, or
Okay.
being around, or associated, or even the fact that some of them had black ladies or men working for them. Because my father worked for a family, well-known family, when he was a young man. And the gentleman was a judge, and his wife was a well-to-do, aristocratic lady. But they brought their children up with my dad. And they
Okay.
loved my dad just like he was a brother to the kids. or an extended son to them. They treated him the same, even though he worked for them.
Right.
And the kids growing up love Dad. Oh, Jim, I mean, what do we do without you? If you're not here, come on, be a part, you know? And that was the kind of relationship. So when they grew up and went out, they were better prepared when other blacks approached them.
Right.
It was like, oh, yeah, we are Jim, you know? We don't even see him that way.
Right.
So that, I think, is where the advantage of that comes from.
Okay.
They never put you down. They never belittled you.
Right.
They never said, oh, that they're only good for this or they're only good for that. It was like, yeah, they're your equal. They
Right.
deserve it.
Now, in the African American community in Woodstock, the leadership, I've kind of got the impression from the research and some of the things that
Emmett, you have a call 911.
there was never
Emmett,
any,
please.
I guess apart from some isolated incidents, where they were pushing for integration.
No.
That some of that even came from the outside. So I found evidence of the NAACP pushing for some integration in Shenandoah County from Winchester, the chapter there. Do you find that to be true?
Yeah. It was status quo for the older black people in the
Okay.
community. You stay over here. This is what you do. You
Right.
don't cross that line. But my mother, being an independent, strong black woman, she said, you're not talking to me. You know, this is my child. This is my decision. You're not my leader.
Right.
She told several of them. You know, I've been given my own mind. And I respect you for who you are.
Right.
But if that's where you want to stay, then God bless you. But me and mine will not. And it didn't go over, like I said, real well. First of all, my mother was an outsider in the community anyhow. My father married her, brought her from Mount Jackson here. So it was already touch and go with the relationship. We're bringing in somebody from outside. And a lot of people have that narrow-minded concept.
Right.
You stay within. And after she got here, like I said, she became independent. She went right to work. She kept her house. She raised us. She didn't associate on the side. She went to church. She, and it was like, golly, this woman's different. But that was just her. And a lot of them had a hard time, especially the older ones.
Right.
Now, the younger, once they saw how it went, and they were able to experience it little by little. And it was like, oh, this is how it is.
Okay.
So, but yeah, you had that where, as far as leaders, my mom told several of the older people, maybe you think you're a leader, or maybe you're theirs, but again, you're not.
Okay.
I don't answer to no one but God. So.
Now, there's more to integration in Shenandoah County than just the school. That I've done the research on the, when the pool's integrated and the theater integrated and things like that. Do you have any experiences related to any of those things?
Well,
apart from
that's not things that I really pushed.
Right.
Kind of went along with the program to a
Okay.
certain degree. Didn't overextend that. I didn't do set-ins or demonstrations or anything like that. As far as the movie theater, I didn't do a lot of swimming. But because I'm not a swimmer, unfortunately, I regret that now. But due to the movie theater, I mean, it was just common practice. When we went in, we went to the balcony, we went to the upper level. And to be very honest, I preferred being on the upper level anyway. So that wasn't a big deal to me.
Right.
I didn't personally put a whole lot into that. That was things that came along later
All right.
and adjusted once it was done.
Right.
Even the local pharmacy where you could go in and get a soda or whatever. Didn't push that a lot. But it happened, and once it happened, it was fine. But mine basically was the school.
All right. And I'm sure you experience a lot of the segregation, of society, like the restaurants and some of those other things. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that? How that maybe what things were segregated in Woodstock, and
Well,
a little bit of your experience.
Pretty much the movie theater, like you said, and once they did build the swimming pool, and like I said, the local Walton and Smoot pharmacy, going in, sitting at the fountain, that kind of thing. But I don't remember it actually being a big problem anywhere.
Okay.
I really don't. Again, most of the local black people were well enough known. Those who wanted to would go, and those who stayed away. I personally, like I said, my father, now the only one thing that I can remember is we would go up to Max Trucking Center. I don't even know whether they're still up there. It's up on Route 11 here. And we would go in there, and the blacks had to go around to the back and go in a side door that was right there at the kitchen.
Okay.
And they had a booth there, and that's where the blacks went.
Okay.
They didn't go in the front door into the dining area.
Right.
And I can remember going there frequently with my parents, but that was just normal practice. My father didn't push the issue of going in the front door.
Right.
I grew up not knowing any different. But then once it did change, I guess I had gotten older and I heard people talk about it. Guess what?
Right.
We're not going around to that back door anymore. We're going right in the front. But other than that, and like I said, it just wasn't a big issue to me. I was perfectly satisfied where I was.
Right.
And with just the ability to go to school freely. And that opened me up then to me more association with the white children to maybe not do so much in the community, but to go in their homes, to go on trips together and do that kind of thing. That was more exciting to me than actually pushing the issues right there at Little Woodstock.
Now, the junior high school you talked about, you went to what, Francis?
Francis Junior High.
Was that an integrated or a segregated?
Oh, yes.
That was integrated school.
Oh, yes. Georgetown.
All right. Do you think that made you more prepared to go to a...
Certainly helped.
Okay.
Certainly helped. If nothing else, it built my self-confidence.
Okay.
Because that was a unique experience for a little country girl. Like I said earlier, one-room school with 7 grades to go in a city school.
Right.
And be exposed to all of the different cultures, different races, different styles of teaching, more fast-paced.
Right.
I mean, the whole thing. So, yeah, that truly helped prepare me.
And, I guess, I'm interested a little bit in the kind of the difference between what would have been the typical white student experience here and the typical African-American student. So, coming from the African-American school in Woodstock, do you think if you had gone straight into Central, would you have had a different experience than the white students who had gone to a different...
I don't really think so.
All right.
No.
So you don't think that the education you got, I guess, in elementary school was that much different than the...
No.
Okay.
It laid the basics.
Okay.
Reading, writing, arithmetic, as the old folks say, they're the 3 ground layers. And she interjected that. And along with it, like I said, things that I really like, history, science, geography, that was just injected in. But laying the basics that I was able to go in and pick up a textbook and start from scratch. As long as I knew I had the help of that teacher. And like I said, all of them were very encouraging and helpful.
Okay.
But no, I don't think it maybe would have been a little bit as far as my self-confidence. But I never denied myself. I was never afraid.
Right.
And when they asked me right point blank, I was like, oh, yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I don't have anything to be ashamed of. I'm willing to learn, and that's what school's for.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get behind or I feel that I'm not meeting expectations, hopefully I'll have somebody I can go to wherever I am. That's always been my thought. I mean, no, you're not going to get everything right off the bat. I tell my grandchildren that, who the last one's graduating from high school this year. But you can do it. There's no thing as I can't. Yes, you can. It might take you a little longer, or you might need a little more help. But my dad, like I said, who didn't have much schooling,
Right.
but was self-taught in so many things. And he was one of those kind that could sit you down and reason with you through intellect and talking with you, than raising his voice and being very disciplinary. In my household, my mother was the disciplinary.
All right.
And believe me, you didn't want to mess with Miss Janie. I learned that early. But my father was always the one that could reason with you.
All right.
Sit down. My father explained to me about death when my sister died. And, you don't forget those kind of things.
Right.
And it has been a part of me, and I appreciate that. He made me understand. And there were a lot of things, little habits and things that I had that were not right. And he would sit me down and explain to me why what I was doing was not good for me or anyone else, or dangerous, or what I could do. And those are the, I was like, wow.
Right.
And he instilled in me, there's nothing that you can't do. But if by chance there is something, you don't worry about it, because maybe it isn't your thing.
Right.
You try something else.
Find your thing.
Yes. And along with that, as I said earlier, there was the faith issue. You go to Sunday school and church and you learn about Jesus. You don't leave him out. So I credit, like I said, my community, my parents, and Mrs. McLean. Our morning ritual, Bible study of some sort, a Bible verse, and Pledge of Allegiance, and then what you got out of the day before.
So you think, your faith and maybe the church really helped you
Absolutely.
when it came to integrating the schools?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Very much so.
And, I'm curious, you talked a little bit about, the superintendent of the school and a little bit, and, I know you weren't the one who were talking to them, but do you think overall, I guess, were they opposed to integration? And I guess maybe as a follow-up, if they were, do you think they would have eventually integrated the schools themselves if they hadn't been
It just
pushed
really was such a shock. This is not something that, I'm getting little bits that maybe they're thinking about it, or someone's talked to them and come and prepared me. Mom just approached him cold turkey, right out of the blue. I'm doing it. What? And I think it was more the shock of it. The timing of it, I don't think it has any whole lot to do with it.
Okay.
Because eventually it's going to happen. Hey, Alice, I'll be done in a minute.
Oh, that's all right.
But they knew eventually it's going to happen.
Right.
Eventually, all things come to an end and have to eventually. But I just didn't think, I done got through with Skip, with Jim and Janie, now all they have is Gwen. I don't think they expected necessarily from my mom and dad.
Okay.
They gave no inclination of it, even though they were independent people.
Right.
They went about their business, they did their jobs and all that. But it was just the now, under mine, But once it happened, they were very supportive.
Okay.
So I just think, and then another thing about him was when Mom did go, she called his home to go and talk to him. She said, I want to do this one-on-one. I'm not going to do this publicly yet. He was in bed sick. His wife said the day she was to go, don't you think we better call and tell him? He said, no, let her come. I feel better. And I don't think it was anything big, but he was sick. He had been at home sick for a few days. So when Mom went, she said, well, maybe I should come back. And his wife said, no. He said he'd be willing to talk with you.
Sure.
So I don't know what he expected from
Right.
Mom. But he was receptive to her. And when she went in, and she said, well, I hope you feel better, but I just want to come and tell you first. And he said, what's that, Miss Tolliver? And she told him it was what? What? You're going to do what? Because looking back on it now, little stories that Mom told me, after I finished elementary school, they kept the process of the segregated schools for a while. It left the little one-room school where I was because they had to expand to a larger place. So the black children ended up going to one of the old white schools when they built a new one.
All right.
And when the teacher was not feeling well, they had to find a substitute. And several times they approached my mom.
Okay.
Miss Tolliver, would you be willing to go up and just sit with the children for a day or so until the teacher gets back? She's not feeling well. And just be there and maybe go over a few things with them or listen to them read or basic things. And she said, yeah, I'll do that. Well, Mom got involved in the school system that way, as being someone they knew they could count on to call to go kind of just sit there. And she ended up getting more involved with the children.
All right.
Because she came away knowing some of them weren't where they should be in their education.
Right.
And she commented. But that's just been the way she was. But I think that's why I think he thought, well, maybe she's coming to talk to me about something happened there, one of her experiences. And when she told him, no, I'm coming to tell you we're going to enroll Gwen essentially for the coming year.
Right, because that the research I found is right until you went to Central, they were planning on building new black schools in Woodstock and Strasburg.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Leave status quo the way status quo.
So
no one's doing anything about it. We'll let sleeping dogs lie. It's working out so far. I mean, and nobody, of course, I don't know, nobody in the white community, as you were saying, was really pushing for it.
Right.
And a lot of times you think, well, they're happy, so leave them alone,
Right.
if you don't really sit down and talk to someone. And most of the black community was satisfied and happy.
All right. Well, really, that's pretty much all I have. Is there anything else?
Nope. Nope.
It's
going on. I've talked to several that followed after me, and none of them had any issues. Everybody got along, and right to today, friendships were made. I still, up until just a few years ago, we had our annual class reunions, and it was always so good to see all of them. A lot of them, as I said, they grew up in the community close. Their parents were my parents. Of course, a lot of them are gone now, but I got to know them one-on-one, and we shared with one another. I started a little bit earlier in my life than a lot of them. A lot of them had the opportunity to go right from high school to college.
Right.
I got married.
Okay.
So I had a completely different lifestyle. I had a daughter. Then after I had my daughter and settled in, I went back to school.
Okay.
So I started earlier than a lot of them. And in a lot of the class reunions, I would talk about my daughter and getting older and her school experiences, and they were just starting to have their children. And I've been blessed. And then the last couple, I would talk about my first grandchild. It was like, what? Mine is just barely getting in high school, and you've already, and it's like, yeah, but I started earlier than you guys. So it's always been good, I would say, since then. No issues, no problems.
And that's what I've gotten pretty much from everybody else, too, is that there were no problems.
Yeah. No.
All right. Let's see if I can get this thing cut off. That's always 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 thing cut off.